Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar and open house series, Raw Food, Does It Really Make a Difference? This presentation is an abbreviated version of our July 2023 presentation where we had the extended version of the webinar and an open house series about our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition class. And we're going to be discussing our science of raw food nutrition at the end of the webinar. So let's jump right in. So here we have a dietary comparison. Not good on the left, which is about where most people live, and getting progressively better and greener as we head to the right. Most conventional people eat a conventional diet, basically based on animal products and processed food. What do we see in our population as a whole, likely as a result? Overweight and obesity at record rates, high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, brain fog, dementia, low energy, increasing rates of cancer, etc. Now, just because these two things are correlated with each other, that does not necessarily prove causation. However, when we consider that there are an increasing number of case histories as well as scientific literature full of studies and examples of when people take this approach and change to a plant-based diet based on whole, unprocessed foods, very consistently we see body fat normalize, and people often keep it off for years and years, decades, oftentimes for the rest of their lives. Blood pressure normalizes. You get increased blood flow to the heart. Type 2 diabetes can reverse. Gestational diabetes need never happen, and type 1 diabetes can be managed much more easily. Various autoimmune diseases can actually be reversed. People can think more clearly. They have piles more energy. It can lower the risk of some, maybe not all types of cancers, but some types of cancers. And there's many case histories where people have actually fully recovered from cancer, which is great to see. So that's number one. Number two, let's look at some of the attributes of this particular conventional way of eating. We're going to look at undesirable substances. After that, we'll look at desirable substances. And finally, we'll look at digestive energy required for the diets. So some of the attributes of this conventional diet is it's high in total fat. A lot of that fat is saturated fat. It also contains cholesterol. It's high in dietary carcinogens, two of which we'll talk about in this presentation. There's excess sodium, refined carbohydrates, pesticides, preservatives, artificial flavors and colors, etc. It's not so good. Whole food plant-based diet tends to be a lot lower in fat, tends to have about a quarter the amount of saturated fat that a conventional diet does. There's no cholesterol in it. It is much lower in dietary carcinogens, tends to be a lot lower in sodium, hopefully doesn't contain any unrefined carbohydrates, low to no pesticides depending on what percentage of your diet is organically grown, hopefully no preservatives or artificial flavors and colors. So by switching over here to the right, you take a lot of things that contribute to poor health and inhibit good health out of the picture, and that's a huge part of the equation. How about desirable substances? Well, most of the things that are really desirable are pretty low in conventional diets. Super low in dietary fiber. Most people don't make the very modest 25 to 35 grams of fiber recommendation per day. In the sample diets we'll see, we're going to be in the upper double digits, approaching triple digits in grams of dietary fiber. Low in key vitamins like vitamin C and some of the carotenoids like beta carotene, as we'll see. Low in key minerals such as potassium. Low in antioxidants, low in phytonutrients, things like sulforaphane, which we'll see, and polyphenols, for example. And low in water content. Most people are pretty well dehydrated, whereas whole food plant-based diets, especially those based on fresh fruits and vegetables, are really high in fiber, as I mentioned, high in key vitamins like vitamin C, E, beta carotene, and other carotenoids, minerals like potassium and calcium and iron and others, loaded with antioxidants, phytonutrients, and very rich in water content. So we have a very opposite profile in that regard. And as far as digestive output goes, I mean, think about it. When we overeat pizza and pot roast and chicken and all those things, when we overeat at holidays, most of us aren't fired up with energy, ready to go, play a game of football out in the yard. You just want to sit on the couch or lay on the couch and watch other people play football. That food takes a lot of digestive energy, and when your body's busy digesting, it's not able to heal and repair itself as effectively as we would like. When we eat fruits and vegetables, they provide so much good stuff without the bad stuff, like we mentioned, and they also require very little digestive energy. That's why we have so much more energy and we feel so much better, and that's why our body can heal itself more effectively. So when we have the combination of increased nutrient content, decreased undesirable ingredients, and decreased digestive output, we head from left to right, and things keep getting better and better and better. That's absolutely fantastic, and many of you here have experienced some of those things. Now, what we're going to do for the rest of the presentation is we're going to assume that you're already doing really well, plant-based better. You're eating a whole food, plant-based diet. That's a really, really good diet that can help people overcome most of those health challenges that we saw. But we're going to take a look at what you can do to go from a plant-based better diet to approaching a plant-based best diet. Leave some starches behind and add more fruits and vegetables. And this, around this end of the spectrum, is where we want to hover consistently. We can juice fast and water fast at times, but we can only do those things temporarily because we're at a calorie deficit generally, always with water, usually with juice, and we can only do that temporary, but those can be strategies that can come in occasionally to help us as well. So how do we go from here to here, and what are the additional benefits? So let's jump right in at a quick dietary comparison. We're going to look at a starch-centered diet, which I would consider to be a plant-based better diet, and we're going to compare that to a vegetable and fruit-centered diet, which is getting really pretty close here to the plant-based best realm. So in the starch-centered diet, we have oatmeal with fresh fruit for breakfast, so mostly cooked, some raw foods in there. For lunch, we have vegan burritos with sprouted grain tortillas, some additional cooked things, brown rice and black beans, and some raw ingredients as well, some avocado, tomato, and zucchini. For dinner, very simple here, a couple cups of cooked broccoli and 1 cup each of quinoa and chickpeas. Very simple, no added salt, all whole food here. The most processing is that you're going to ground your flax seeds, and they sprouted and mushed up grains to turn it into tortillas, didn't even turn it into flour. So it's a whole food, all plant, healthy diet. Now, on the fruit and vegetable center diet, we're not having oatmeal for breakfast. We're having a fruit and green smoothie from orange, banana, fresh or frozen mango, and we're going to throw a couple of kale leaves in here. For the lunch, it's very similar, but instead of the sprouted grain tortillas, we're going to have a half a head of lettuce and put some of these ingredients in the lettuce and use lettuce instead of a tortilla wrapper. We did use 2 extra Roma tomatoes here. It's 4 total instead of 2. And then we're adding some steamed vegetables, cup of kale, cup of carrots, and 1.5 cups of cauliflower. And then I just put the kale, carrot, and cauliflower on the bottom. Dinner's similar, keeping the 2 cups of cooked broccoli, but we're going to a half a cup of quinoa and chickpeas instead of a whole cup of those. And in their place, we are adding a large raw vegetable salad. So we're having the other half of the romaine lettuce left over from lunch, a couple more tomatoes, and 1/2 cup of raw carrots, 1/2 cup of raw zucchini, and 1/2 cup of raw cucumber. We are making a dressing. We made a batch dressing, but this is the portion for this salad, made out of celery, onion, and fresh squeezed lemon juice with some chia seeds and walnuts in there. So let's take a look at the comparison. Here's our starch-centered diet on the left, 1,800 calories. And even though there was more food In the fruit and vegetable center diet, it's about 100 calories less, and the macronutrient profile, as you can see here, is nearly identical. I designed the two diets so it would come out that way, so we have a fair comparison. So then what I did is I looked at calories and a whole bunch of different nutrients here, and we can see, just like we just looked at, we came down about 100 calories by going to the more fruit and vegetable diet. We went from a really good 80 grams a day up to about 100 grams a day, which is fantastic. We and by the way, this is all relative to the other one. We increased our beta carotene content about 20-fold. And by the way, the majority of that came from the lettuce. Even though lettuce isn't orange, there's a lot of beta carotene in the lettuce as well as the other vegetables. We tripled our vitamin C intake. We almost doubled our vitamin E intake. We increased vitamin K about 4.5 times, and we more than doubled folate just from making those changes that we just saw. How about the significance of vitamin C and beta carotene? Many of you know Dr. T. Colin Campbell conducted the most authoritative epidemiologic study on health and nutrition ever conducted, ever published in the peer-reviewed literature, called the China Study, which was called the China Health Project in the early days. And he was quoted as saying, after looking at mass amounts of data, plasma antioxidant levels, especially vitamin C and beta carotene, are inversely associated with several cancers, meaning the higher levels of these things, the lower level of cancer. And that's really good to see, going from our plant-based good diet or better diet to our plant-based, getting near our plant-based best diet. Even though there were almost the same amount of calories, 100 fewer in the fruit and vegetable diet, and the percentage of calories from fat was the same, we have more of each of the essential fats, which is beneficial for a lot of reasons, and lower amounts of other types of fats that we don't need as much. We have more than doubled our calcium intake. We've got a nice increase in magnesium, some increase in sodium, but a greater increase in potassium for an improved sodium-potassium ratio, which many believe is more important than the total amount of sodium in terms of its effect on one's blood pressure, which is a major risk factor, major reason people take medications and get side effects, major risk factor for cardiovascular disease, the leading cause of death in the US and around the world. We've got a little bit of an increase in iron, and we stayed about the same on zinc. So that is really, really good. So bottom line here is we've dramatically increased many key nutrients by adding more fruits and vegetables to our diet. So we added more vegetables, raw and cooked vegetables, and we added fruit. So we can't totally apply everything to adding more raw food there. We did add more raw food, but we also added more vegetables to get all of those nutrient increases that we saw. Dr. Karen and I are big fans of including loads of vegetables in a healthy raw food diet. We are not in the fruitarian camp. Vegetables are just so super important, and we don't see any good reason that people should miss out on their benefits. Plus, they can be really delicious and fun to eat as well. So it's very interesting when you look up the nutrient databases. If you looked up the cooked and the raw version of the same food, it will show you the same nutrient levels. It doesn't actually take the effect of cooking into account. It would be great if the nutrient bases did, but they don't. So on top of what we saw in those bar charts, there's been quite a bit of research that we go into depth and detail. Dr. Karen does actually in our Science of Raw Food Nutrition curriculum about nutrient losses from cooking. Here's just a few excerpts from a couple of Dr. Karen's sections. Researchers looked at steaming cauliflower, and they found after 6 minutes of steaming, a 21% loss of vitamin C. And after steaming for 14 minutes, no one would really do that. It would turn your cauliflower to mush, but the researchers wanted to see the difference. They saw a bit more vitamin C loss. Boiling hair vitamin C showed greater losses, and we showed you lost a little over a third of the beta carotene after boiling cauliflower for 6 minutes, and about a 25% loss of folate after boiling for 8 minutes. So of significant, but there's still some good nutrients left in cauliflower. How about broccoli? A couple different studies showed no change in vitamin C after steaming 5 to 10 or 5 minutes. Another study showed a 21% loss of vitamin C after steaming for 6 minutes, and another study said no change in folate content after steaming for 4.5 minutes. So minimal loss in these nutrients from steaming broccoli, which is actually good to see. Now, when we boiled broccoli, there was more vitamin C loss, notably. There was some loss of beta carotene, of other carotenoids as well, and folate, kind of similar to what we saw with cauliflower. And they showed, of course, as we've seen here, a greater loss of vitamin C with boiling compared to steaming. So when we go from steamed vegetables, which we think are super good foods, to raw vegetables, we take a step up and get even healthier by retaining more nutrients. Now, as far as undesirable substances, in addition to the fat and cholesterol and all the other things we took a look at on our early slides, there are some carcinogenic substances that form in foods when they are heated, that were not in the foods before they were heated, but are actually created with heat as a catalyst. One of them is known as acrylamide. And acrylamide, as we can see here to keep things abbreviated, is considered to be a probable human carcinogen. And it's also thought to have neurotoxic effects, and it can be a cumulative neurotoxicant in rodents as well as humans. So 3 major sources of acrylamide are in many industrial processes. Acrylamide is a byproduct of what's produced. Cigarettes contain quite a bit of acrylamide, and if you don't work in one of the industries that create acrylamide and you don't smoke cigarettes, heated carbohydrate-rich foods are your major source of this substance called acrylamide. Researchers figured out, actually Swedish scientists in 2002 figured out exactly how it's made. You take a food with an amino acid called asparagine, a non-essential amino acid that's found in abundance in a variety of different foods. You combine that with glucose or another reducing sugar that can take part in oxidation reduction reactions, and you add heat of 120 Celsius, which translates to 248 Fahrenheit. Water boils at 100/212, so baking, roasting, broiling, frying, all those things, you form this substance known as acrylamide. Now, the good news for us is steaming and boiling don't get that hot, and pressure cooking, like the Instant Pot, get just about, they just kind of flirt with the threshold temperature, but the cooking times are reduced, so there's really minimal acrylamide formation with pressure cooking, so we're not worried about that in terms of acrylamide formation. Just to put things in context, the EPA and the EU, in 8 ounces or in a liter of water, they have a limit as to how much acrylamide should be in there, and we can see from various foods like Cheerios made from oats, corn chips made from corn, and various French fries and potato chips, we can see levels of acrylamide much, much, much higher than the various agencies say should be in water. So that is of significance. It's a stressor to the body we think you could do without. So what can you do? Don't smoke cigarettes. Don't work in an industry that creates acrylamide if at all possible. And when you want to eat some carbohydrate-rich foods, don't heat them. Fruit doesn't have to be heated, and vegetables and starches, you can steam them or pressure cook them for the best nutrient retention, or boil. You won't form these things at all, and that is the way to avoid acrylamide. In a lot of plant-based diets, there's baked potatoes, there's roasted vegetables, there's air-fried this and that. Those higher temperatures form some of that substance known as acrylamide, which we believe you are better without in your diet. Another type of product that is thought to be carcinogenic as well as contributing to other unhealthful processes in the body are known as advanced glycation end products. Many of us have heard that diabetes, high blood sugar level, increases the risk for many various disease processes. Glucose, the primary simple carbohydrate used as fuel, the preferred source of fuel for the majority of the cells in our body, has a tendency to stick proteins together. When glucose sticks something together, it's known as an advanced glycation end product. It goes through a bunch of changes, and now those things are stuck together. What's very interesting is, let me read this quote here. In addition to AGEs created internally from circulating glucose, which we just described, it says many arrive ready-made in the foods we ingest. Indeed, diet may be the single greatest source of AGEs, and with lesser amounts arising internally and from cigarette smoking as well. So they're saying that when you heat foods, the heat process sticks proteins together. Think about a raw egg white versus a cooked egg white. It's made out of protein. The heat makes it solid and white instead of clear and runny. When we bring those products into our body from heated foods, we get a lot of the same complications we show from diabetes, from high glucose level sticking proteins in our bodies together. So let's take a look at a quick chart that looks a little bit complicated here. They measured 6 measurements here. Serum AGEs, that means traveling through the blood. This one, methylglyoxal, it's a precursor to AGEs in the body. This is LDL cholesterol that has been altered by glucose or by stuck together proteins from the outside, making it harder for the body to get rid of the LDL cholesterol, which is considered bad cholesterol. So it contributes to higher levels of bad cholesterol in the body. And C-reactive protein, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and vascular adhesion molecule are all indicators of inflammatory, unhealthful processes in the body. So for each of these measurements, they had a baseline. They measured the people before they intervened. Then one group ate a high AGE diet. The other group ate a low AGE diet. Then they had a washout period, and then they switched the groups and again fed them a high and an AGE diet, but the high group was low and the low group was high. And in every case, what they found was that on the high AGE diet, inflammation increased, and on the lower AGE diet, inflammation decreased compared to baseline. Now, it's really fascinating. If there's anything you want to pay attention to in this section, this is it right here. The high AGE diet and the low AGE diet were made out of the same foods, but the high AGE diet foods were cooked at higher temperatures and for longer periods of time, and that resulted in more AGEs in the food, and that resulted in more inflammation and other unhealthful processes in the body. So cooking, in a sense, in that regard, is actually pro-inflammatory. What if you want to avoid this stuff to the greatest extent possible? We go into depth and detail. These are my sections, or a few of my sections, in our Science of Raw Food Nutrition curriculum. Here's a little bit of good news from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I've been a member of them since 1998. Last summer of 2023, they had in their diet in their magazine, a vegan diet reduces intake of harmful dietary compounds. And it said a plant-based diet reduces the intake of harmful dietary compounds called advanced glycation end products by 73%. And it goes on, it's bad and blah, 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 just like we talk about in class. And it's always nice when newer studies keep coming out and confirming what we already know. So just going vegan gives you a major reduction in consuming these harmful dietary compounds. But you can do even better. So what's really interesting to note is that if you look at raw seeds versus roasted seeds, the roasted seeds will have about double the dietary AGE content that the raw seeds do. If you look at vegetables, you see almost negligible amounts of AGEs when they're raw or if they're steamed, but when you start baking, roasting, frying them, you also about double the AGE content. So when you reduce those by 73%, that's really good. You can do that on a plant-based good or a plant-based better diet, but you can cut your levels probably in half or more in addition to that by not cooking as much or just cooking at very low temperatures, which is bringing you over to the plant-based best end of the spectrum. Even more good news for us. Here is a study called Novel Advances in Inhibiting Advanced Glycation End Product Formation Using Natural Compounds. So there is the article. It's pretty recent. It's from 2021, and I've highlighted a few things, and a lot of this stuff gets really complex, and nerdy people like me have an absolute blast reading through this stuff and figuring out how it all works, and then reporting some of the highlights to you, translating into English to not make it too complicated. So a couple of highlights here. Vitamin C can compete with glucose for binding to proteins, reducing AGE production in vitro. So that is in a test tube, but they believe it works the same way in the human body. Vitamin C. Studies have shown that vitamin E has a good inhibitory effect on aging and glycation. Glycation is the process of those AGEs forming. Additionally, a combination of vitamin C and vitamin E has a greater inhibitory effect on glycation and AGE accumulation than either agent alone. So a few AGEs are inevitable. Okay, with acrylamide, you can avoid it completely. A few AGEs are inevitable, but for the little bit that might form in your body, higher levels of these nutrients can decrease their formation. And so let's just review here what happens on the plant-based better to the plant-based best diet. We have dramatic increases in both vitamin C and vitamin E, keeping us even healthier. Okay, this same study, now in any study, the scientists always refer to previous studies on the topic. Here's what we know, here's what's been seen. And then they say, but now we're doing something else to advance that in this particular study or tease out a particular point or something else. So in referring to another study, the study that we just looked at said, a recent study showed that sulforaphane, it's one of the isothiocyanates out there. For those of you familiar with those group of chemicals, the most well-known one is called sulforaphane. That sulforaphane suppresses the AGE receptor because of its antioxidant properties and its inhibition of the AGE to the receptor AGE access, a little complicated there, may be a new therapeutic target for diabetes and to reduce AGE levels. Now, what's interesting here is sulforaphane is found in raw cruciferous vegetables, not cooked ones. It's different than some of the other nutrients. So we saw that steaming and boiling can decrease vitamin C intake and our levels in those in broccoli and cauliflower like we saw. That's because heat actually breaks down the vitamin C. In this case, heat breaks down an enzyme called myrosinase, which is involved in the production of this stuff called sulforaphane. So when you cook and you break down this enzyme, sulforaphane doesn't form in the first place. So yet another aspect of additional benefits to eating your raw cruciferous vegetables raw as opposed to cooked. Doesn't mean they're actually bad for you cooked at low temperatures, but you're just missing out on some things that you can get extra credit for if you don't cook those things or if you cook less. And by the way, I love cauliflower. I love tree collards and kale. I eat these things every day. I've been doing so for over 35 years. I've had over 10,000 heads of raw cauliflower in my life, lots of kale and collards and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and other things. They're staples in my diet, have been for decades, and my thyroid function is optimal. I do not think I'm an outlier. That's a whole other big story, but I just wanted to mention that briefly. Okay, going back to Dr. Campbell's China study, after years and years of looking at data, studying so many people, looking at data from all over the world, the basic conclusion of that is the richer the diet is in the kinds and amounts of nutrients provided by foods of plant origin, the lower is the risk for chronic degenerative disease. He had two corollaries that went along with that hypothesis. And the second one said, the closer the foods of plant origin are to their native state, in other words, minimal cooking, salting, and processing, the greater will be their benefit. That makes sense. We just saw less formation of harmful substances when we don't cook our plant foods, and we saw greater retention of nutrients that can help minimize the effects or the formation of various things and keep us at healthier levels. And just for fun, I've met Dr. Campbell on many occasions, including when I was at practice at True North, and he and his family started coming there back in the 90s, and that's a whole story about how he recovered from dystonia from discovering dioxin, the active ingredient in Agent Orange. I also met with Dr. Campbell in 2021 for our summit that year, our plant-based summit that year, and I got to talk to Dr. Campbell about some of those topics, which was just an absolute honor and really fantastic. So to start to summarize here, we've got unhealthy on the left, and as we go from left to right to the greener end of the spectrum here, we increase our nutrient content, we decrease undesirable ingredients, and we don't expend as much digestive energy, and we get healthier and we feel better. And we would encourage all of you to go for it. You're worth it to make a difference and include as many fresh fruits and vegetables in your diet as you're comfortable with, as you're happy with, and don't stress if your diet isn't perfect yet. Okay, so how can we implement this? How can we learn more? For those of you who want to engage in this, who want to get the best out of your health, who want to maximize the dietary component of your health, and hopefully you want to maximize other aspects of your health too, like sleep and exercise and healthy relationships. But as far as the dietary part, a Columbia University study in 2008 showed that education is the number one component for long-term success. This is part of why we like to educate all of you, to make sense out of this, to cut through conflicting information. And the more sense it makes, the more you understand the depth and detail, the likelihood of you implementing it goes up exponentially. So we offer classes that are fun, relatable, and very thorough. Now you got just a little hint of that here today. Strong scientific validity, but we translate it into understandable English. Our Science of Raw Food Nutrition curriculum has about 15 to 16 hours of educational video. It includes original course content when we taught the class live in person. That's about half of it. And then the other half consists of 2023 updates. Everything is fully up to date. We have a putting it all together section, and we have 2 daily meal plans where we cover a very thorough, nutrient analysis. So we look at an all raw diet and a 75% raw diet to give you different options for how you can cover your nutrient basis and be healthy overall. And in any case, you can watch those videos on your own schedule 24/7. In addition to that, on April 4th, May 9th, and June 6th, 2024, we have live Zoom conferences, 2 per day at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Pacific time, which translates into other times depending where you are in the world. If you want to join us live for those and ask us questions and get clarification, you are welcome to do so. But even if you can't make the times, you can submit your questions in advance and you can listen to the audio recordings of each conference. And that way you're interacting with us fully, just not in real time. That way it can work for anybody's schedule. We taught this program live for nearly 10 years. It's evolved over time. It's very dialed in. We've gotten very good at teaching it at this point, and we've gotten so many rave reviews all over the place. If you take a look at the link below this video, for those of you watching the recording, and click on that, we've laid out how the course works. We have many testimonials from students who have taken our course over the years. We have people who just want to be healthier for themselves, their friends and family. We also have a lot of nurses and doctors and people who know some things and know some good things, but they take our classes to learn even more depth and detail, see how the big picture all fits together. For those of you watching the recording, registration ends on March 28th, coming up pretty soon. And the reason for that is 1 week before the April 4th live conferences. And so as soon as you join the course, you get access to the first 1/3 of the material. Then after this conference, the second third and the bonus material. Dr. Karen's live conferences are on May 9th. And then after that, you get access to the rest of the course material. My final set of conferences, live conferences, are on June 6th. And then you still have 3 more months of access to the rest of the course to make sure everything is covered. Basically, a lot of you know about our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition curriculum. You can go to our website, rawfoodeducation.com, click on the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition tab, and the last 18 to 20 minutes of each webinar you see there talks about the details of our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition curriculum. The Science of Raw Food Nutrition is the abbreviated version of that class. It's about 1/10 the cost. So for those of you that $5,000, it can be a little less with our pay in full and early bird specials. If that and 200 hours or so of time commitment over a year is too much, you can still get an incredible education with us for just under $500 with our Science of Raw Food Nutrition curriculum. Thank you all very much for joining us. Take a look at the information link below, which also allows you to register, and we look forward to seeing you in class.